I have skills built in Claude that work with Databox MCP, which aggregates data from the 50 different tools that we use. I can run a report and see how our business is running across everything. Not only that, but I actually have context. I have every one of our sales calls, every one of our podcasts, every one of the surveys we run. I have that vectorized into a database so I can efficiently search that and say, hey, what's going on with this feature adoption and why? Because not only did I see that the feature adoption is down, I can also go figure out why. Did customers stop asking about it? Did they not like it? Did we break it? Did we roll out something that didn't make sense? Like, what is it? And I can analyze that without talking to any human in my business.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. Hello and welcome back. Today I'm excited to welcome back Pete Caputa to the podcast. Peter is the CEO of Databox, former vice president at HubSpot, and one of the most influential voices in partner-led growth, agency ecosystems, and revenue operations. Pete helped build and scale HubSpot's agency partner program into one of the most successful partner ecosystems in SaaS, and today leads Databox, an analytics platform that helps businesses turn performance data into better decisions, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have him back. Throughout his career, he has been passionate about helping agencies, consultants, and services businesses create measurable value for their clients through data, partnerships, and operational excellence. What makes Pete's perspective especially valuable is his ability to connect growth strategy, partner ecosystems, content marketing, and business intelligence into a cohesive approach to scaling modern business. Whether discussing agency growth, SaaS leadership, or revenue operations, he consistently emphasizes one principle, which is to help others succeed first, and then growth will follow. Pete, welcome back to the RevOps Champions podcast.
You got me in my feels, Brendon. That was probably the nicest intro I've ever had. Thank you.
Well, I'm just stating the facts, right?
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Pete, thanks for being here. Pete, you've had a unique journey from engineer to entrepreneur to a HubSpot leader and now CEO. Looking back, what experiences most shaped how you think about growth and leadership today?
I think you kind of covered it there, focusing on customer value. The one area where I've obsessed my career on is building ecosystems and then focusing on the value to the people in the ecosystem and the companies in the ecosystem. And that's what I guess motivates me, is because I can see a direct impact on the partners of the companies I work at, whether it's HubSpot or Databox. I even had a startup beforehand where I worked with we built a partner program. That startup's long gone, but it's kind of the same principle of building a system that helps other businesses succeed. And when they do, my company succeeds. And so I love that because I can build systems that are used by other people that, make them successful. So I'd say that's the one theme that I have over.
Yeah. And of course, what an exciting time to be doing that right now, right?
It is. I feel like with AI, especially, there's so much potential for individuals to build cool things. I don't know if I've told you this story, but my son had a class in high school. He's just graduated high school, but as a senior, he did this entrepreneurial business management class where they actually got to build a business. And he, as an 18-year-old with no coding experience, him and a few buddies basically built a two-sided marketplace where restaurants could list deals and students could take advantage of them and then show their phone at the cash register and get claim it. And that's kind of stuff that a few years ago you would need a handful of engineers, not just one, to build. And so I think the world's changing so fast, and Databox, we've moved from being a product to more of a platform company where people are building really cool things on top of us. And so, it's kind of in a great alignment for my career in terms of what I've always worked on, coming together with the technology.
Yeah.
And the need people to really innovate on top of the products that we've built.
Very cool. Yeah, which of course is why you and I have been talking again more recently. Pete, for the folks who don't know what Databox does, how would you, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you back was it's been 2 years since I had you on the show. And, there's so much more you could do today. I mean, you and I and thousands of other people have been dreaming about the things that are now possible that were not possible. And then, of course, there are things that we didn't even dream of that are now possible.
Right.
So maybe just explain to us, like, what is Databox and, what is the value proposition essentially?
Yeah. So, and we talked 2 years ago, so I'll kind of give you what's happened in the last 2 years. So I will say though, that our vision hasn't changed. Like our vision is still to help businesses make every decision a data informed decision, or as many decisions as possible be data informed. And you do that, for across the world. But that hasn't changed. I think what's changed is the technology that we've both built and can leverage in our product. And so it's really three things, all towards the pursuit of enabling regular people to make data informed decisions. The first one is like we've built this really sophisticated data layer that pulls in data from any system that a company uses. We've made it really easy for popular software, for hundreds of popular software. It's literally like log into your HubSpot, log into your Google Analytics, log into your Facebook ads account, and we just pull the data in, and we pull it in a way that it's defined so that it's really easy to build a dashboard, or really easy to start analyzing the data using AI in our side of our product. But you can also push any data into Databox. So that's kind of step one, is like that data aggregation. Step two is doing what most people do to analyze data. Most companies these days is you build metrics, you build dashboards, you build visualizations. You might add context to a report and send that out to people. And that's, a core part of our product and always has been. The newest thing, which really has changed in the last year plus, is the AI on top. So once you do that, once you aggregate the data, once you define your metrics, once you even build some dashboards, now AI is in a really good spot to not just tell you what happened, but also help you understand why it might have happened, if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Also help you figure out what might happen next, sort of predict what might happen next. And then most importantly, like, what can you do about it in order to change the performance in the future based on your, historical patterns. And so AI, if you structure your data, aggregate your data, and define your data well, can actually do the work that most companies rely on a really smart problem, probably their smartest, most mathematically inclined person to do. And now AI can do that in minutes. That's really what we've been focused on for the last year. The value of our product has changed really from just being able to visualize and report to actually being able to do in-depth analysis and understand and make decisions based on your data, what you should be doing next.
Right. One of the things that we talk about a lot in the franchise space, because unfortunately it still happens way too often, and that is, something happened 6 weeks ago at the franchisee level, but the franchisor at the corporate franchise office only found out about it today because, again, as you were explaining, in that particular scenario, they don't have all their data aggregated. So they don't even have access to all the data across different systems. Never mind the fact that it's not in real time, which, as far as I'm concerned, there is no reason for any business today not to have data that's available in real time.
Pretty much real time.
Within a day.
Yeah, exactly. There's no excuse not to have it within a day. Exactly.
Right. So, of course, what we're trying to figure out is
I would say within an hour. Like most businesses don't need to refresh most of their data every 15 minutes, but refreshing every hour, make sure that you didn't miss anything.
Yeah. But I think you touched on some of the realities. And of course, this is, like most products are built to solve real business issues in this case, which is what Databox is doing. And so if a company, no matter what industry they're in, if they do have multiple sources of data, which means that they have multiple technologies that they use, because that's just how they currently set up, and most businesses are. There has to be a way to aggregate and pull all that data in, because you often need to do that in order to make decisions, right?
So I think that's step one, right? So, and I know in franchises, there's franchise groups that might operate a handful of franchises. They might be sophisticated enough to have some of their own systems in place that the franchise or doesn't even have access to, right? And then, of course, there's franchisors with hundreds or even thousands of franchises. And so human being able to even to access that, let alone monitor it, is usually a challenge. We have a handful of franchise systems that use us to aggregate data from different CRMs, different ad platforms, different ad accounts, other marketing tools as well, other financial tools, et cetera. And then it's a matter of managing access to who has what, right? Of course, you're not going to let franchise X access franchise Y's data, but of course, the franchisor would like to have access to all of the franchise data, right?
Sure.
But then the franchises would want to see, how do we compare to other franchises, which you can do in an anonymized way, right? So there's different ways to set that up so that there is that access for the right people, and then transparency, and then, of course, even cross-franchise insights, right? So that everybody can make smarter decisions. That's
Absolutely.
usually with a franchise, when one's or a group of them are more successful, you want to kind of emulate that across different franchises.
Yeah. Yeah, which again, I think even just talking about that, maybe there are franchise leadership teams that just aren't aware that this is possible. But that's essentially how we set it up in HubSpot, where corporate, uses HubSpot for their franchise development, but then they also make the same CRM available to all their franchisees.
Yeah.
And then it's, to your point, it's all permission based. So, franchisee one and franchisee 150, if
Yep.
they don't have the same owner, they're not going to have access to the same marketing materials, and they know what data they're tracking, and it all goes back up to corporate. So the corporate has the visibility to make decisions. Yep. But we then would potentially bring in, a business intelligence or data aggregation tool or something that does it all in one, like Databox,
Yep.
where we can make sure that they're able to analyze that data, which is a massive opportunity, right? And it sort of avoids that scenario of, because every franchisor and anyone who's ever worked in a corporate situation in a franchise understands that you want to solve for an unhappy franchisee as quickly as possible. 6 weeks is obviously not acceptable, and in many cases, the longer it takes to solve their issues, the worse it is.
Yep, agreed. I think, as you know, we have a very strong integration with HubSpot where we have franchises that are using us. It's usually pulling in other marketing data, other ad data, financial data, et cetera, so they can have that global view. But the work that you guys do in getting both the franchise development and the franchisees using the same system so that the franchise owner or a franchisor has a visibility and can spot when something's not going well. That's huge. The other thing that our customers do is set up anomaly detection. So once data is aggregated in Databox, it should define what metrics mean. So literally like saying this metric revenue means this, or franchise pass-through revenue, whatever, means this, and they can define what that means. And then also the system captures how to calculate it. So when you say, hey, show me the franchise pass-through revenue, it does that the same way every time. But then once those metrics are defined, our system can detect any anomaly, positive or negative, and alert people of it. So what we talked about before, if you have, hundreds of franchises using different systems, there's no one way that one human can pay attention to that. You'd have to literally have somebody sit there, and go through dashboard after dashboard every day just to catch that thing before it got worse. But instead, you can rely on systems to AI and statistical techniques to say, hey, this number is out of the ordinary, alert the team and say, hey, you should address it. Can even go so far as if you define your metrics well enough, you can alert the team and say, this is why this metric is out of whack, right? It's like you've had fewer, sales calls this week with potential franchise buyers. And here's why. This ad campaign stopped working last week, for whatever reason, right? So by having all that metrics aggregated, you can go even a level deeper and understand why.
Yeah, which is like that whole cause and effect thing that I know you also, is part of how you think, and I'm guessing, and you even do it in your sleep, I'm guessing.
So the anomalies is one statistical function, right, where it's detecting something out of the ordinary in a time series, right? But there's also correlations. Correlations can look at two different metrics and say they have a 0.8% correlation, which means that like when this one changes, this one's probably going to change in some similar pattern that it would have normally. There's also going to be metrics that are not correlated, in which case you would never say, oh, this went down and therefore this went up. So by doing that mathematical, statistical technique, you can say like, this is most likely why something would have occurred.
Yeah. So Pete, let's go back to, what else has really changed for you as a business for Databox, and the parallels between what you're seeing and the opportunity that exists now for businesses, whether they're in the franchise or multi-location space or not. What are the other things that you're excited about right now that leadership teams can do today that they couldn't do a year or two ago?
Yeah. So as you know, I'm an engineer. So I think in terms of systems, and I think we're at I don't know if golden age is the right term, but we are at a golden age, I'll just use it, of systems running businesses. And I don't want to downplay the importance of people. People are obviously very important in running a business, but I almost think that systems are even more critical, at least than individual people, right? Systems can survive. And when you look at like some of the biggest companies in the world that have grown, over the last decade or two, take an Uber. I guess you can even take a HubSpot, although it's not, Uber level, but take an Uber, right? Take, of course, Google and Facebook, but even some of the newer ones like Claude, they don't run on people as much as they do on systems. I don't know if you've ever read the book by Andrew Chen on network effects, where he breaks down how some of these businesses grew, like Airbnb, like Uber, et cetera. And the people running those businesses, literally, they imagine them sitting in rooms similar like Star Trek, where they have all this data everywhere, and that's what they're monitoring, and that's what they're trying to influence by their sales activities, their marketing activities, et cetera. And that was like 10 years ago, right? And it wasn't feasible for most businesses to operate at that level. But now with AI, it's very feasible for even the smallest businesses to operate at that level, where they're looking at data, running campaigns, running experiments, et cetera, seeing what works, and then building up that knowledge in a system so that the system learns and is improving over time. And so I think like every business, franchise or not, should be thinking, how do I build systems? And I know franchises are systems builders. What I see, most franchises, most businesses are still missing the sales, marketing, to some degree, the customer service systems that they could be running to really capture data and optimize performance. So that's, to me, the opportunity in front of everybody. It's nearly automating everything. Now, of course, a lot of work needs to go into building and designing the system. You have to capture context about your business, capture context about your customers, and figure out how to keep that context fresh. You got to set up systems for agents or people to do things repetitively so that things can be measured and improved. But setting up those systems is really the opportunity.
Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on multiple things there, but I want to come back to, well, I'll start with this one, which is, so in the franchise space, private equity is growing at an incredible rate. And, what you just talked about for the last couple of minutes essentially is the reason that private equity keeps investing heavily in franchises, because private equity invests in two things: people and leadership and systems. Because I think they see the gap in the franchise ecosystem, that there's so much more that can be done with this technology and data systems that are currently massive opportunities, and they know how to fix that. And they also know how to train and bring in the right leadership to make sure that they can run those systems in a very data-driven way. And then I think that touches on the other thing. So, we talk about on the show all the time. So the 4 pillars of the revenue operations model that we essentially implement for a franchise brand, again, it's in this order. It's people, process, data, and technology. Now, and again, we see this all the time, but when we're speaking to a prospective franchise or client for the first time, they often are under the impression that if they implement a really good revenue operations system around the HubSpot CRM, that it's going to fix their data, process, and people issues. And of course, that's not how it works, right?
Not at all.
It's typically, we have to go back and say, well, do you have the right people doing what they need to do, running your processes? Are you clear about what your processes are? And then do you know what the KPIs or metrics or OKRs are? Because we need to map that manually, and then we can build the system for you. And when we talk about that, often, a lot of models include data and technology as one thing, and we purposely separated. And I think now I'm really happy that we've kept those separate, because the data layer is so separate now from the technology piece, which brings us back to what you do, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I love your stepwise approach, right? People, process, data, and then technology. Data is really a byproduct of running a process effectively, and similarly in repetition. Otherwise, you don't have an understanding of what happens and why. You can't measure it, at least. And so I think that's important. Yeah, if you implement a piece of technology that forces the people to change their processes, that may or may not work. I do think there's a little bit of like best practices out there on how to measure things and how to leverage technology, of course, which should factor into your processes. But yeah, starting with the existing people, existing processes, and building things that are repetitive and measurable and efficient, right? Because the technology should ultimately make them more efficient, or at least more effective. I think that's the right approach for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, one of the most common friction points in the franchise space is this friction between the success of the fran dev or the franchise development team and the success of the franchisees. And you talked about this earlier. The pure, or sort of the original model, is marketing, sales, and customer service. And in the franchise space, the customer service gets split into two, because you have to take care of, and the way we think about customer service is franchisee service, right? Which is how are you supporting your existing franchisees? Because, and to your point, this is transferable to any business, because the businesses that do really well are the ones who take care of their existing customers.
Yeah. Yeah. You shared a stat with me a few months ago, and like the number of franchises that fail, franchise systems that fail. And I was shocked at how high that was. And I think really any business thrives or fails based on the success of their customers. And so putting that first is key. I do know enough about franchising to know that oftentimes the franchise is so focused in on acquiring new franchisees. And so they spend all their sales and marketing over there acquiring new franchises. And meanwhile, if the existing franchisees aren't successful enough, it's going to be hard because there isn't anybody that spends a lot of money on a franchise without talking to a few of them first. And so I think that's really important. And then vice versa, when the franchises are doing well, it's going to be a lot easier to market and sell to a new franchisee, right? Because word of mouth will be there and people will be talking about it, and the buyers, the consumers will be talking about the franchise and the products and stuff. So yeah, it feels to me like the work you're doing of using HubSpot to enable the franchisees to do sales and marketing in a similar way across multiple to their end customer, to the consumer, or B2B, the businesses. That's huge for ensuring or enabling the franchise or to help them be successful, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the simple analogy that we use all the time is, and I learned this when I was fortunate enough when I was in my early 20s to go to Europe and just started working, odd jobs. And one of them was working as a longshoreman in the port of Hamburg in Germany,
Okay.
where, and coming from Africa, we didn't always have the best tools, available to do our work. But in Germany, you have the best tools to do your work, no matter what work you're doing. So even as a longshoreman, yeah. And that has stuck with me for all these years. And one of the things that I think about all the time is, in most countries, and at this time of the year in the US, of course, specifically, you have family barbecues, whether it's a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And, you get together with friends and family and everyone's catching up on how things at work and whatever. And to me, this is one of the things that I'm always thinking about that we're solving for is the folks who are working for our clients' businesses. I want them to be the ones who are saying, I love my job because I have the tools to do my work. And of course, as you know, having the tools is one thing, but if you don't have clarity on how your success is being measured in your specific role, no matter what that role is, it's really hard. So, providing that visibility and providing them the tools, which in our case is the technology that they use every day to do their jobs, it makes for much better, happier employees who are also then telling their friends and family, I love my job because I have the best tools. You should come and work for our company. Because, cousin Joe is saying, geez, I'm not really loving my work right now because I don't have those tools and I'm still using stuff that was built for the 1900s or whatever it is. So,
I think that's another benefit of aggregating performance data is it's about arming or enabling teams to act more autonomously. I know like getting them the tools is key, right? So that they can do their work. But another thing to think about is if you can get individuals within your company visibility into how their work impacts other teams or how other teams impacts their work or just what the company is focused on and trying to accomplish, then they're unleashed to make smarter decisions that are aligned with the vision of the company that might help somebody else in the company, somebody that helps them do their job better because they see the impact it has on another part of the company or the customer directly. That's another benefit, right? We talked a lot about, helping the franchise or get visibility into what the franchisors are doing. But the other benefit is like now having everybody at the franchisor giving them access, right? Or, maybe there's ways to give certain access to data to a franchisee that, respects the privacy of the other franchises through benchmarks or understanding of correlations or whatever it is so that they can make more informed decisions. And so step one, again, still is always aggregating that data, but then what you do with that data, who you make that visible to is another big question because that can impact the productivity or their effectiveness or even what they decide to work on because they're more informed.
Right. Yeah. Which is actually another sort of growing space within the franchise ecosystem is franchisee education.
Oh, okay.
You talked about the scary statistic that, again, it's not that different to starting a business that's not a franchise. But the fact that so many companies that decide to franchise, the ones who don't actually make it, they don't get past 10 units and then get out of it completely or fold or whatever. Even the ones that are successful, that they've got over 100 units and whatever other things break at that stage, right? So whatever got you to 30, 50, and 100 units is not going to get you from 100 units to 300 units.
Right.
But one of the things is typically, as your leadership team continues to elevate and has to bring in additional leaders to keep managing those relationships with franchisees, the one thing that they forget about is that a first-time franchisee, they've never run a business before, right? They were doing whatever their job was before. They saved up all this money.
Yep.
In many cases, their life savings because they wanted to take control of their lives, but they've never really had to deal with P&Ls and running a profitable business before. And again, if you can, as a franchise, provide, it's not that difficult to provide, like, these are the metrics for success. These are the things that lead to profitability. These are the things that you have to measure that are going to be costs every single month, no matter what happens. So now you have consultants who've been in franchising for a long time who are now going back and educating these folks, because it comes back to what we were talking about before. If these existing franchisees aren't successful, then the whole brand is not going to be successful.
Right.
They're as weak as their weakest franchisees. So, Pete, let's just get back to, a lot of people get very scared when we start talking about data. And a very typical thing is, everybody listening to this call is collecting more data than ever before, yet decision-making doesn't seem to be getting any easier. So why is the gap between having data and actually using it to make better decisions still so big?
If we could solve that one in 10 minutes, I can retire. There's a lot of issues. I think number one is numeracy is pretty low amongst the general population, even in white collar work, right? I think people, they can maybe use spreadsheets in a basic level, but doing analysis of data is usually pretty off. I think they don't know how to structure data correctly. You'd be amazed at the number of times people connect a spreadsheet to Databox, and like some spreadsheet has rows, and then some part of it has columns over here, and like they don't know basic stuff in terms of how to do numbers is a problem. So I think that's one issue. And then the second thing is people don't think about data until they need to. It's like, oh, we're running this process. How's it working? When in reality, it needs to happen up front. Like you need to think through, like you talked about, process first, people then process, but process first before you start thinking about what data. But you got to do that. You got to say, all right, we're doing this process. This is the data we're going to measure. And this is the system we're going to use to measure that data. And because they don't think about it in a system, whenever they go and do analysis, it's usually ad hoc. And it's hard. So combine those two things of like, not everybody knows how to do numbers and the fact that the system isn't defined up front, then I think it gets hard. And usually what happens is companies are still operating at the pace that was possible before, which was, we're going to do an annual plan. We're going to do a quarterly review of the numbers. We're going to do a report every month, although we're not going to change much. We're just going to kind of report out it. Maybe we'll fire someone. Maybe we'll go yell at someone to work harder. But for the most part, we're not changing the strategy and everything. And now that if you set up all that stuff right, data analysis can be done in minutes and it can be done in depth. Like I can literally go, I have skills built in Claude that work with Databox MCP, which aggregates data from the 50 different tools that we use. And I can run a report and see how our business is running across everything. Not only that, but I actually have context. I have every one of our sales calls, every one of our podcasts, every one of the surveys we run. I have that vectorized into a database so I can efficiently search that and say, hey, what's going on with this feature adoption and why? Right? Because not only did I see that the feature adoption is down, I can also go figure out why. Did customers stop asking about it? Did they not like it? Did we break it? Did we roll out something that didn't make sense? Like, what is it? And I can analyze that without talking to any human in my business. But to get there, people have to really build systems. And so without building systems, you're not going to get benefit of the fact that AI can do analysis, the fact that data can be moved around quickly and cheaply, the fact that you can define your metrics. All of that stuff is possible, but unless you think about it from a systems perspective, it's just, you're not going to get there. So you got to step away from the business and say, like, how are we operating our business? And what's the next step that we can do to be more efficient, to be more effective, to produce better outcomes? So just to give you an example, like I work really closely with our marketing team, and each week we are producing marketing content. We are running campaigns. We are recruiting affiliates. We are co-marketing with partners. Like we are doing all that stuff, but we also take time and say, like, what are the repetitive things that we're doing? And how do we create a system that can allow us to do that much more efficiently? How do we create a system so that somebody else can do that piece so that I'm freed up to do something else, right? So that's the real key. And so like we're dedicating time to, some amount of the marketing team's time to say, instead of creating that 10th YouTube short, write a skill that takes our latest podcast, identifies the 10 shorts that it could be, and writes the script and edits them. Or, take all this written material about our next product launch and come up with a video script that we can use for our launch webinar, right? All of that stuff can be done so much more efficiently with AI. But unless you step back and say, what can we create skills or what can we automate, you're never going to make any progress. And so it needs to start there, not with the process, not with what,
Yes, not with the tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Pete, as we start to wrap up here, looking ahead, how do you think AI will change the way leaders interact with data, make decisions, and run their businesses over the next couple of years?
Yeah. Well, I think the potential is to achieve what most executives and business owners have always wanted to achieve, which is to set the vision and let it run. I don't know if you guys use Entrepreneurial Operating System. So EOS model, the Entrepreneurial Operating System model, talks about, setting your 10-year vision and figuring out your annual and your quarterly rocks or initiatives that you're going to prioritize, right? And there's a role in the EOS for the visionary, and all they do is they set the vision, and then there's the operator that goes and executes. And the visionary is focused on talking to customers and figure out where the market's going and guiding the ship. And in reality, what I find is that most companies that implement EOS or other systems like it never quite get there. They either that or they just kind of quit and like, I'm going to be the visionary and the owner and you go run the business, and they're stepping away, right? But I don't think most really get there in a way that works. But that is the potential, I think, with AI, right? Is to build a system where both people in the company and agents can act autonomously, can innovate autonomously towards the goals that the executive team sets. But, it's not so much about like, how do I build a system that enables the business owner or the CEO to make decisions? It's how do I build a system that enables as many people as possible in my org to make smart decisions, but be accountable to them, right? So record them, understand them. In some cases, record them in a system so that AI can interpret whether those decisions were any good. So that's the future, is really getting to that point where I think entrepreneurs can be entrepreneurs, operators can be operators, and the system kind of works and course corrects itself to some degree.
That sounds very, very appealing because, to your point, most business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, they love the idea of not just a self-managing business, but a self-multiplying business.
Totally. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And which, again, I think, it'll come back to the 4 pillars of revenue operations, which I know in your case, and there are many other businesses that have gone the route that you have, which I think makes a lot of sense. Whereas you no longer have separate revenue operations from business operations to people operations, finance operations. It's all just operations. Because of technology and AI, everything has become completely cross-functional. And we see that even in our work. We're not just working with a CTO or a CMO or the sales leader. Ultimately, it's the COO, to your example, it's the operator. They are the one that's making the cross-functional decision because it is a cross-functional benefit and a cross-functional solution. But I guess, so then what are the steps? What do you think is a good first next step in order to get to that sort of longer-term self-multiple company?
What I constantly do, and I've done this since early days of HubSpot, was I learned this lesson from Mark Roberge, who was my first boss at HubSpot, VP sales, and then later the CRO. And it's force your team to write down their processes. And that goes really far because one, you're doing 2 things. One, you're getting the process written down, which is step 1, building a system, making sure that you're consistent, being able to measure it, et cetera. But number 2 is you're empowering the team to build process and own process, because really the people doing the work should ultimately own their process. They'll see the opportunity to improve it, or at least some of them will see the opportunity to improve it. And so I think that's the first step. That's like exactly what I do with my teams, is just like, hey, you guys did something cool over there. Where's the process for that? Like, oh, we didn't write it down yet. Okay. You've done it a few times now. Now's the time to maybe sit down, at least write a first draft of the process. We don't have to stick with it, but like, think about how we build a process for that. And before, when I used to push that, it was largely to be able to measure the outcome and the effort required of that process. Now it's because we can automate big portions of that process, right? And when you start to think about doing all these processes in isolation, what reveals itself is a system that can then be optimized. So for example, somebody in marketing is responsible for all of our social publishing. We have somebody in marketing that does our product marketing launches, which usually involves building a landing page, maybe doing a webinar, doing an email to customers, et cetera. But those two processes were completely separate. So once we put them down on paper, now we can daisy chain them. I don't know if that's the right term, but now we can put them together where it's like, oh, we're doing a product launch. Let's, of course, do our normal email, landing page, blog post, et cetera. But then let's tack on all the social posts, right? And now that we have all that context gathered, we have copy written, like writing those social posts, because we have some skills that tailor the content to the channel and the format, et cetera, it's done quicker. And so that's just one very simple example. We also do partner co-marketing. Imagine taking all that context and now attaching partners at the end of it and say, hey, you guys have first access to this new feature. We want you to be part of the launch. We're going to promote your use case that you've been pushing out to the market. And we also would like you to promote the launch. And so now we have a partner co-marketing attached to the end of that process. So that's just marketing, add sales enablement to that, add customer communications to that, and used to build a really efficient system. But it starts asking everybody to sit down and say, what do you do on a repetitive basis? And is that documented?
Right.
And do you have a system to measure that?
Yeah. And then, of course, I think the only thing I would probably add to that is how often do you go back and revise that process? Because, one of the things that we see, again, in the franchise space, as well as many other industries that we've worked in, is, the sort of mindset of what got us here is going to get us to where we're going kind of thing. Because back to your question, like, have you ever written down that process? Yeah, we wrote it down 5 years ago. So, when you had 30 units 5 years ago, now you have 130 units. Don't you think that process might have changed? There's again that reviewing the process, because if you don't review the process, because the process has changed, I can promise you. Unless if you haven't grown, maybe the process hasn't changed or it's changed very little.
I think it's like, as people do things at more volume, they're like, oh, okay, I can make this more efficient. Or they might get feedback from like 10% of the time they do it. It's like, oh, that's off and I need to work that into my process. So processes should get robust and be revisited. I think, the beauty of AI is that you are forced to write down the processes, because otherwise you can't instruct AI what to do or how to do it. But we actually ran into a problem with that, is that we now have skills that we've written, Claude skills, that actually contradict each other, that do similar things. So now there's this management layer on top of it. It's like, all right, we need somebody that's keeping an eye over this whole system. There's, the team built the system and built the skills, wrote the skills, so they know what's happening, they can detect it, but they got to take that time to revise and review what they did, make sure that we're not giving the system contradictory instruction, et cetera.
Like, you have to review your agents and skills and whatever, the same way that you would have to review the work of a human. Pete, thanks so much for joining me. Any last word of advice?
I think there's too many people sitting on the sidelines right now. I went to school for chemical engineering, graduated in 98, and quickly realized that the internet was going to be the biggest thing my lifetime, majority of my career. So I went back to learn how to write code, started a web startup, got myself a job doing that stuff. I was 21. So I was very flexible, didn't have any responsibilities. I'm not saying everybody has to make that much of a pivot in their careers. However, I would challenge everybody to go out there and learn something every week they can be doing with technology, with AI. And of course, I'm biased here, but I would encourage everybody to think about how they can automate data analysis, do more in-depth data analysis than maybe they're used to by leveraging AI. There's a massive opportunity to make more data-informed decisions if you structure your data correctly, aggregate it correctly, define it well, and then use a proper system to do actual data analysis with AI. So I would challenge everybody to try it. It's really more change than the internet from my perspective, right? I lived through that change and saw how much that changed society. I believe this is an even bigger change.
Absolutely.
And so don't sit on the sidelines, get aggressive with learning this stuff.
Good advice. Pete, thanks again so much.
Thank you.
Take care.